So my mother wants no part of me anymore, so we're basically going to cut ties. All because I refuse to name my daughter after her. I want to give my daughter another name. And I'll tell you guys why in more details, but just know, the outlook of me and my mother is not looking very good. As I sit here in my lavish apartment overlooking the city, I can't help but think about how different my life could have been if it weren't for my mother, Tiara. She comes from a wealthy family background. Her parents were the founders of a successful clothing brand. It's a brand that everyone knows, and it's one that's been around for as long as I can remember. It was renowned for its high-quality products and stylish designs. It wasn't easy for my grandparents to conceive my mother. After several failed attempts, they finally had their little miracle. In celebration of their joy, they decided to rename their clothing line after her, and made her the face of the brand. And so my mother became Tiara. Not just a name, but a brand that everybody recognized. Growing up, my mother was spoiled beyond belief. She was given everything she ever desired, and then some. She never had to work a day in her life, as her family's wealth was enough to sustain her every whim and desire. As a result, she grew up without any sense of humility or respect for those she deemed beneath her social class. It was as if the world revolved around her, and her alone. I heard stories of how she used to flaunt her wealth, showing off her designer clothes and jewelry to anybody who would look. She never missed an opportunity to remind others of her family's status and power. As she grew older, her arrogance and entitlement only grew worse. She began to believe that she was invincible and that nothing could touch me or bring her down. She felt like she was above the rules that applied to everybody else. She failed to learn that there's more to life than material possessions and empty status symbols. As my mother, Tiara, grew older, she began to receive suitors from all over. However, she would turn these men down, one after the other, simply because they were not up to her standard. In her eyes, they weren't as rich or successful as she was, and so they were not worth her time or attention. This is until my father arrived. He was everything my mother's been looking for. Tall, rich, handsome. My grandparents welcomed him with open arms, impressed by his status and gifts. One of these gifts was an old Italian painting, which my mother and her parents immediately fell in love with. It wasn't long before my mother and father were inseparable. The relationship was a mixture of luxury and indulgence. It was clear to everybody at the time that my mother's love for my father seemed superficial, based solely on his wealth and status. Everyone except my grandparents, well, my mother's parents were blinded by their greed and desire to remain rich, and they saw my father as the perfect match for their daughter. If they truly loved their daughter, then they would have asked questions like, was their love real, or was it just a facade? Would their relationship last, or would the money eventually tear them apart? But they didn't bother with all that. They pushed the relationship envelope forward with abandon, determined to secure the continued existence of their lineage financial freedom. So my parents got married in lavish ceremony that was the talk of the town. It was a grand affair filled with all pomp and circumstance that comes with an extravagant wedding. My grandparents were absolutely thrilled, just basking in the glory of their daughter's luxurious life. Everything was going great for my parents after they got married. My father got pregnant with me just 3 months after their wedding, and they were both overjoyed at the prospect of starting a family together. However, their happiness was short-lived. One day, law enforcement officers stormed into my grandparents' house and dragged my father away in handcuffs. My mother was inconsolable, and my grandparents were beside themselves in shock and disbelief. It turned out, my father was a thief, and the portrait which he's given my mother's parents as a gift was indeed stolen from a museum. The police had been investigating the theft for months, and they'd finally tracked down the culprit. My mother had been foolish enough to bring the stolen painting to my grandparents' house, where it was promptly discovered by the authorities. The news of my father's arrest was a shock to everybody who knew him. He had always been successful as seen an upstanding member of society. Nobody ever suspected him of being involved in a criminal activity. My mother and her parents were devastated by the news, and their reputation in society was irreparably damaged. The police also arrested my grandparents on the suspicion that they had aided and abetted my father in his criminal activities. It was a humiliating, painful experience for my family, and it was then that they realized that their greed and desire for wealth had absolutely blinded them to the true character of the man that they've welcomed into their family. I wonder, what might have been different if my mother had chosen a partner based on love, compatibility, rather than a wealth and social status she aimed so desperately to achieve? The arrest of my father and his in-laws had far-reached consequences that went beyond just their personal lives. It also affected the business that my parents had built over the years, a successful clothing line that's been named after my mother. The business began to dwindle as clients abandoned it by the dozens, outraged at the fact that my grandparents were associated with a wanted criminal like my father. It was a severe blow to their reputation around town. They struggled to stay afloat. Things only get worse when my grandparents were bailed out of prison. They've been deeply affected by the whole ordeal, and the stress of it all had taken a toll on their health. Both of them, they suffered a stroke, and they died soon after. It was a tragic end to the story, one that could have been avoided if they had not been blinded by their greed and desire for wealth. They had failed to investigate my father's background thoroughly before handing their spoilt daughter over to him, and it's cost them dearly. My mother was left alone, pregnant with me, the child of a criminal who was locked up behind bars, without any inheritance or financial support and with a tarnished reputation. After my father was sentenced to jail for his criminal activity, my mother's frustration and anger began to manifest in different ways. Unfortunately, I bore the brunt of her emotional outburst as I was born around this time. Every time she looked at me, she was reminded of my father, and it only added to her pain and frustration. If it weren't for the fact that giving me up for adoption would ruin her already tainted image, I'm not sure she would have kept me around. Besides, she needed somebody to run the errands in the house, which she managed to keep since she could not afford to pay for hired help. So, here I was, being treated with every hate my mother could muster. She treated me like I was the physical representation of my father, but I was not to blame in any way. I was not her parents who encouraged her to pursue a life of greed. I never made her fall in love with my father. She was supposed to be cursing her late parents and beating herself up, rather than making me pay for their sins. My mother had not still learned her lesson. She was still acting like she had an empire to her name, living in past glory. She refused to accept the reality that she was broke. If she was humble enough, then she would have got a menial job, but no. She was still fighting hard to maintain a dead reputation. She claimed that she was saving up money to revive the Tatiana brand as a result of my mother's refusal to take on a menial job. She had to resort to, sleeping around with rich men to make the ends meet. Watching her go through this was difficult, and it only fueled my feelings of anger and resentment towards not just my father for putting us in this situation, but equally towards her for making her circumstance bring out the worst in her. It was embarrassing to have a father who was a known criminal, but it was even more embarrassing to have a mother who was, the talk of the town, chasing every rich man simply because she didn't want to be counted amongst the poor. When I graduated from high school, I was eager to continue my education and pursue a college degree in accounting. However, my mother refused to support me financially, citing her financial struggles and, she was not broke. Her numerous boyfriends were taking care of her, She just wanted her son, whom she had turned into a house help, to permanently stay around with her. And it's not like she was taking good care of me. Well, I would not want to go to college with money gotten from harlotry. I had to find a job to support myself. It was during this period of uncertainty and despair that I met and fell in love with a girl. We were young, foolish, but we didn't care. We started dating, and before long she became pregnant. I'm not trying to excuse myself from the fact that I've gotten a girl pregnant, but you need to understand that I had no parental guidance, and I was exposed to adult life at a very young age due to the circumstances of my upbringing. The news of my girlfriend's pregnancy made me realize that I was not equipped to handle the responsibility of a parenthood. I was terrified and unsure of what to do, but I knew that I had to step up and take responsibility for my actions. I went alongside my girlfriend to her parents' house to break the news to them. I did not think that it was fair she faced them alone. My girlfriend's parents were devastated when they discovered that their daughter was pregnant with my child. They had high hopes for her future and could not bear the thought of her throwing it all away for somebody like me. They sent both of us out of their house and refused to have any contact with their daughter until she agreed to give up the baby. I did not need anyone to tell me that I had to do something to help my girlfriend, who had been rendered homeless by her parents because of me. The only option I had was to bring her to stay with my mother and me, but I knew it would take a lot to get me and my mother to let her stay. I brought my girlfriend home, and as expected, my mother absolutely refused to let my girlfriend stay with us. There was no insult she did not hurl at my girlfriend and me. I knew I deserved all that she said, so I didn't bother saying a word. She finally told me to get my girlfriend out of the house before she tore her to shreds. Well, I've never begged anyone in my life the way I begged my mother that day, but the more I pleaded with her, the more stubborn she remained. She even advised my girlfriend to, get rid of the baby. The moment my mother suggested that, I knew that she'd grown from being a terrible woman to an absolute witch. I'm thankful that she never got rid of me while I was in her womb. It took a while before my mother reluctantly agreed to let my girlfriend stay with us, but it was clear that she was not happy about it, and she would give the both of us a very tough time. My mother lived up to expectations, and she would constantly make these snide remarks, just criticizing my girlfriend's every move. She resented my girlfriend for being pregnant. My girlfriend tried her best to ignore my mother's behavior and focused on her pregnancy. I did everything I could to make my girlfriend feel comfortable and supported, but it was difficult with my mother's constant negativity just hanging around us. Despite all of this, my girlfriend and I were determined just to make it work. I started making plans to rent a place of my own once our baby was born. After months of anticipation and preparation, my girlfriend finally gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. It was emotional and overwhelming experience. I was filled with love and pride as I held my daughter for the first time. To my surprise, my mother's attitude just suddenly changed after the birth. She went from being distant and cold to being warm and loving, and she seemed to genuinely care about my girlfriend and our new baby. My mother asked that I name my daughter Tatiana after her. At first, I didn't see anything wrong with that. It was a beautiful name, and I was happy to honor my mother's wishes. However, my mother, she had other plans. She revealed that she wanted to use my daughter to bring back to her life her dead fashion brand, also called Tatiana. My mother saw an opportunity to use my daughter's name and image to promote her brand and bring it back to the public eye. I was shocked and appalled by my mother's suggestions. I refused to name my daughter after my mother or her brand, and I made it clear that I would not allow my daughter to be used as a promotional tool. My mother, at this point, became very angry. She accused me of being ungrateful and disrespectful and went ahead to kick my girlfriend out of the house, and me. It was difficult for us. We were homeless, had nowhere to go. We could not rely on friends and family for support as there was none in sight. It was a good thing I'd saved up some money while my girlfriend was pregnant. We recently moved into a one-bedroom apartment. Though life is not as comfortable as we were used to, we were content. I'm seeking a job as a dispatch rider, and once my girlfriend's strong enough, she'll equally get a job to support us. One thing I'm certain of is this: I would do my best to provide for my daughter. Update number 1. Hey guys, just an update in my life. I know it's been some time, but I decided to get back on here. It's been 5 years since my mother kicked me and my girlfriend and our baby girl out her house. It's been a difficult journey, but I'm proud of how far we've come. My girlfriend's been working hard to complete her college course in accountancy, and I've been working several jobs just to provide for the family. I'm currently a sales rep. It hasn't been easy, but we've managed to find stability and happiness. Today, I had the opportunity to attend my little daughter's school music festival. I must admit, I was not looking forward to it. As much as I love my daughter, I'm not the biggest fan of school events. It was a reminder that I did not complete my schooling to the level which I wanted. I think the school authorities knew certain parents like me would just want to sit it out, so they compelled the parents to present a show of support for their children. I grumbled while making my way from work to her school, but when I saw her on that stage, I couldn't help but feel proud. She had worked so hard for this moment, and it showed in her performance. She, had the audience captivated from start to finish. And when it was over, the room erupted into a standing ovation. My daughter Tatiana rushed and hugged me the moment she was done with the representation, and it just made everyone look in our direction at that moment. And that moment meant the world to me. The joy of discovering that your child is a star is truly something special that I can't explain. It just has to be experienced for yourself. My daughter Tatiana was praised by all. As I make my way home with my daughter, I can't help but reflect on how far we've come. It has not always been easy being a father, especially a poor one. But moments like these make it all worth it. I'm grateful that I did not give in to my mother's demands and that I chose to keep my daughter. Even if I were to do it all over again, I would not opt to get rid of my baby. She's brought so much joy and love into my life, and I definitely made the right decision. Update number 2. Hey guys, things have been going really great lately, though there have been certain unexpected, unwarranted, unwelcomed appearances. 2 weeks after my daughter's school presentation, a parent who was present and ran a children's clothing line brand wanted my daughter to be the brand ambassador. He was impressed by her presentation and felt his brand could use her services. He offered to pay her the sum of $10,000 for each advertisement that she featured in, and she was entitled to a certain percentage of the profit throughout her lifetime. My girlfriend and I were absolutely thrilled. This was an awesome opportunity we could not pass by as we needed the cash fast. The contract was signed and my daughter appeared on screen for the first time in her life. The advertisement was a seller as it caused a spike in sales. I was at home one afternoon when I received another unexpected visit. This time it was my mother. She was the last person I wanted to see, and I'd barely opened the door to let her in when she walked in and sat down like she owned the place. As I looked at my mother sitting across from me in my living room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It's been years since we've seen each other, and her sudden appearance just felt strange and out of place. I knew that something was off. She talked about how she missed her granddaughter, my daughter Tatiana, and how she wanted to be a part of her life again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was an ulterior motive behind her visit. After all, this was the same woman who had thrown us out of her life when we refused to just name our daughter after her. It did not take long for my suspicion to be confirmed. As we chatted, my mother began to bring up how her own failed clothing brand, the one she named after herself. She talked about how she's been watching Tatiana's success as a brand ambassador for the popular clothing line, and how she wanted to use her to revive her own brand. I could feel my blood starting to boil. This was the same woman who abandoned her granddaughter and even advised my girlfriend to get rid of her. And now she wanted to use Tatiana's success to boost her own ego? It was clear that if my daughter had not become a brand ambassador, my mother would not be attempting to associate with us. So I warned her to leave my house and stay out of our lives. I categorically told her that we were not related. I could not believe that she would come back after all this time acting as if nothing happened, and then try to use Tatiana for her own gain. It was absolutely despicable if you ask me, and as my mother stood up to leave, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I knew that we didn't need her in our lives and that we were better off without her, but I also knew that this was not the end of the matter. My mother was not the type of person to give up so easily, and I was sure that she'd be back. As I watched her walk out the door, I knew that we were in for a rough ride, but I was determined to protect my family and make sure that my mother did not try to use us for her gain again. We'd been through enough already, and we didn't need her drama in our lives. Update number 3. Hey guys, I really just didn't plan on making any post for a while, as I did not think there'd be anything worth, mentioning. But my mother just keeps bringing a series of drama wherever she goes. Can you believe that my mother almost ruined things for my family barely 24 hours after I had told my mother in clear terms to, stay out of our lives? Well, get this. I got a call yesterday from the brand which my daughter represented. They wanted the trio consisting of my girlfriend, daughter, and me to show up at their office very early the next morning. It was an awkward call because we were not scheduled to meet anytime soon. We, however, shows up at the office, and we couldn't believe it when the owner of the brand that Tatiana represented told us that he would be firing and charging us for breach of contract. My girlfriend and I were completely shocked and confused. We had no idea what was going on. We had carefully gone through the terms stated in the contract, and we have done our best just to abide by them. While we were still in shock, the owner of the brand showed us a social media post that's been going viral, and it was about Tiara, my mother's deal brand, flaunting Tatiana as their soon-to-be brand ambassador. I felt a deep sense of anger and frustration the moment I saw the post. I knew that this was my mother's doing. She was still trying to use Tatiana to revive her brand, even after I've warned her to leave us alone. So I apologized to our brand owner and explained that it was not our fault. I knew that I had to do something to rectify the situation. So I immediately rush and make a social media post debunking my mother's claim that Tatiana was her next brand ambassador. I also assured everyone that Tatiana was still committed to the brand that she represents, and that there's no truth to my mother's claims. After dealing with the situation, I didn't bother going to see Mom. There's no point. I knew that she was the one behind all this, and I was not going to let her use Tatiana for her gain. I was done with her. I recently sued her in court, and I knew that it was time to take action and put an end to all her nonsense once and for all. It was a very easy decision, and it was the right thing to do. Since my mother was okay with ruining our lives, then there's nothing wrong if I decide to flip the script. Besides, I had to protect my family, and if it meant I was not going to let my mother's actions go unpunished, then so be it. Update number 4. As the day of my mother's hearing in court drew closer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Despite my best efforts to keep her away from our lives, she still managed to find a way to get to my daughter. It was clear that she still fixated on reviving her Deal brand, no matter the cost, and my mother began paying my daughter visits at her school, and she even tried, quote, bonding. My daughter starts trying to convince me to let her spend some time with grandma and all, but I was no fool, though my daughter was ignorant of the fact that she was being used. I knew my mother wanted to get me to drop the charges, receive her back into the family, and let her use my daughter just to use her for the brand. I decided to pay my mother a visit, hoping to finally put an end to all this. As I entered her home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. It's been years since I've been there, but it all felt the same. My mom greeted me with a warm smile, as if nothing's going on between us. She offers me a seat, asks me how I've been. I knew better than to fall for her tricks, so I get straight to the point and say, "Ma, what are you doing? Why won't you let us live in our peace? I would appreciate it if you stay away from my daughter." I said firmly, and my mother just smiled. And then it faded away into dust, and it was replaced by a look of annoyance. "What are you talking about? I'm trying to help her. Tiara is a family business, and it's her inheritance," she replied, in her tone defensive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really that delusional? I knew that Tiara was a dead brand, and there's no way that I would let my daughter Tatiana be associated with it. "Mom, you need to stop doing this. Tatiana has a great opportunity with the brand that she's working with now. She doesn't need Tiara, and besides, a key part of her contract clause with her brand states that she cannot be associated with any other clothing line." That's what I said to my mother, and her expression softened, and she said, "I just don't want to lose my granddaughter again. I miss her, you know." "I miss you too," she said, looking at me with these crocodile tears. The tears did not move me. I've come to discover in all these years that my mother, besides being selfish, is a liar. She's probably trying to put on a show that I would not fall for, putting up a demeanor that portrayed her as being lonely and just wanting to be a part of our lives all innocently. My mind was made up, though. I would not let her use my daughter for her selfish reasons, and my mother soon made the suggestion that threw me off balance. She asked that I end Tatiana's Deal brand that she was representing, so she would be free to represent Tiara, my mother's brand. Her request was really funny, as she said that it informed me that Tatiana would not be paid for representing anyways, as it was her inheritance. I laughed. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't let you use Tatiana like that. We have to protect our family, and that means staying away from Tiara," I said, getting up to leave, and as I drove away, I just pondered on the fact that one could call me a wicked child for dragging my mother to court, but I knew deep down I just had to protect my family no matter the cause. The court hearing is just a few weeks away, and I have to prepare for it. Update 5. Final update posted by OP. I guess this would be the final update to my story, and it will be a short one, as my mother, who's the antagonist, has been, well, dealt with. See, she finally appeared in court, and the judge ordered her to pay my daughter Tatiana the sum of $10,000 for almost jeopardizing her contract with the popular brand. My mother became bitter after the ruling, and though I initially thought it was over, oh boy, I was mistaken. My mother tried keeping in touch with us after that, and then it was clear that she would not give up without a fight. I had to relocate my family to a better apartment, but that simply did not stop my mother from finding us out of frustration. I decided to get, well, proper restraining order this time against her. The restraining order would be for life, and I knew that it's only going to help protect my family from her stupid, destructive influence. I got the order approved in less than 2 weeks, and I waited patiently for her to show up at my house, before I handed her the restraining order with the promise to come after her with the full weight of the law if she ever chose to come close to my family again. As I reflect on everything that's happened, I know that I've made the right decision, and I don't care what anyone else has to say about it. My mother's obsession with her dead brand and her selfish desire to use my daughter for her gain and cause so much damage and pain. But my family has also grown stronger through this ordeal. My girlfriend and I, well, we've weathered this storm together, and I know that we're in this for the long haul. In fact, we're getting married next month, and I think it's only fair that I put a ring on her pretty little finger. She's been with me for years when I had nothing, and even given me a beautiful daughter that's changed our lives for the good. As I look at her, I know that she's the only one I want to spend the rest of my days with, and I'm grateful for everything that she's done for me. It just seemed like the mother of this story just did not want to give up. She wanted to use OP's baby no matter what. And I'll be honest with you guys, it just seemed like she was super toxic, and I'm glad OP decided it was the right move to cut her out. Let me know. Would you have done the same, or would you decide, you know what, I'm going to join forces with her, and I am going to try to revive the brand deal? Let me know if you would try that, or what exactly you would do in the comment section down below. But that's going to wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content, guys. If you're new to the channel, just take a second right now and click that subscribe button, just so you never miss any daily videos. Have a fantastic day, and Mr. Reddito will see you in the next one. Oh, peace!